Okay, that looks like the major flurry is over. So welcome to this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending on where you are in the world's session. This is, I think, number 5, possibly actually number 6 in the skills and learning track. I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague Chris from the US, who's going to speak to us about the 7 super secrets of a systems programmer. Before I pass the control over to Chris, can I just remind you that everybody will be on mute for the duration of this session. If you have any questions, please use the chat window. Chris will be able to come back to the questions at the end, unless there's something urgent, in which case I can interrupt. The other thing to remind you as well is that we really do appreciate feedback for the presenters, particularly in this environment where you don't get any feedback from your audience as you're going through. So any hints and tips and your view of how this has gone would be very much appreciated. In the last of Chris's slides, there is the QR code that you can use. You can also find that in your agenda, and there's also a web link if you prefer to go down through that route. So, as I said, please keep an eye on the chat window. You'll be able to see any of the questions other people ask. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Chris, and thank you.
Paul, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Honestly, it is my privilege to be here today. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I hope everybody and your families are all safe in this really crazy year of 2020. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. I appreciate it. So without further ado, over the next hour, I'm going to be talking about what is a ZOS systems programmer. How do you get there from here? So if you're sitting in the audience and you're a new hire, I hope that this is going to be valuable to you. If you're sitting in the audience and you're a 30-year veteran, I hope that this is going to be valuable to you. I want to go over 7 secrets, because after all, this is a presentation about secrets, and then I have a quick closing slide. So just some background. This presentation that you're going to see today is my experience. So I've been a zSysProg for 5 years. I absolutely love it. I'm super passionate. And I totally believe in this little circle I have on the bottom right of the screen here. I believe this to my core, that we have to share knowledge. Like, we have to help each other. We have to learn. And undoubtedly, I will probably learn from you folks today with questions at the end, or stories that you tell, or somebody will email me after this presentation and we'll have a dialogue. And I guarantee I'll learn something. And I hope that you learn something from this presentation today. And I want to have some fun along the way too, a couple stories here and there. So that's who I am, and that's where we're going. Typically, I give this presentation in a face-to-face atmosphere. We're all in a conference room. We're all, we can all see each other. So I know we have the challenges of being virtual. If you have a question, we're going to save them to the end, but I really do. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your stories. If you say, hey, Chris, we just got to the end of your presentation. I'm really surprised you didn't talk about this. I want to hear that, because that will probably help me. So that's my perspective. That's my attitude, and let's rock. So what is a zSystems programmer? I mean, you got to start a presentation by defining the term, right? You have to. So the next 2 slides I have try to explain what a zSysProg is. So when I came to this job role, I came mid-career, and my team had no clue what to do with me. And they stuck me in a corner, and they assigned me a mentor. And I started tagging along with that mentor to meetings. And I would go into a meeting, and I remember very clearly, it was one of the first meetings I went to with my mentor, and he's talking to the customer, and I'm completely lost. After 30 seconds of conversation, I'm completely lost. And the customer turns to my mentor and says, "Do you guys have liberty?" And I'm literally thinking, well, yeah, we have freedom. And my mentor says, what version of WAS Liberty would you like installed? So this is that language barrier that you're going to hit as a new zSysProg. And I struggled with this language barrier for about 6 months. And this is no joke. I could go into a meeting, and for 30 seconds, I could roughly understand what was going on. And after that, I was done. And it took me a long time to simply be able to keep up in conversation. And it took me even longer to be able to contribute productively to that conversation. So I still haven't answered what is a Z-Systems programmer. So number one, we know that it's pretty complicated. And I try to, when I explain what a zSysProg is, I try to equate it to like a house. So on the right-hand side of the screen here is my idea of a house. And with any house, you start with the foundation. So just like with Z Systems programming, you have to start with the base operating system. So for me, part of our job duties on our team are we have to actually wheel the mainframe off the truck onto the floor, wire it up, do your IO, all that stuff, set up your hardware, set up your operating systems, configure your security. Now, chances are you're sitting in the audience listening to this saying, we don't do that. And that's one of the things I love about a zSysProg is that we all differ shop to shop. So we have sister teams that I work with, and my counterpart on a sister team, they don't do the IO part on a raised floor, and they do stuff that I don't do. And that's what's so to me so cool and awesome about this job role. And I'll get to that in just a second. So once we have the foundation built, then with our house, it's how many rooms do you want? How big do you want your kitchen? So for zSysProgs, it's what's your middleware stack? How much space do you need? Are you going to be using Zoe exclusively on the system? What about Unix system services? Are you going to be using that? Once you get your house built, then your kid hits a baseball through the window and breaks the window. So just like on ZOS, not that any of us would ever have a ZOS that has problems, never. But just like on ZOS, if something happens where you run out of space in a storage group, you have to go administrate that. So this is a part of ZOS stuff that I love. I love the administrative part. Actually, I like all of it. So anyway, when I explain to what a Z system programmer does, this is my experience, right? And guaranteed, there's someone in the audience today that's like, you know what? We don't do any of the base operating system stuff. We just do the middleware installation. So all of us have a little bit different flavor of what zSysProgs do. If I could look over the past 5 years of my zSysProg journey, I break it into four categories. And I the first month that I was a zSysProg, like I said, my team had no clue what to do with me. They literally stuck me in a corner. They got me a user ID on a system, and they basically said, "Go figure out how to run some JCL and familiarize yourself with the manuals." And for the first month, I knew for a fact that I was going to be fired because I had no clue what I was doing. I could not get around. I then went into this phase for about 6 months where I'm now starting to do some actual stuff on the system that's going to be valuable to our team, but I require serious hand-holding, right? I mean, this is some major babysitting going on. And I was starting to get familiar with ParmLab and ProcLab, and I'm starting to now see Unix system services, and I'm playing around with all this stuff. I then went into this phase for 2 years, and I'm just gonna pause for emphasis. 2 years. So my mentor is giving me very specific tasks. He's giving me tasks that correlate to my capability. And of those tasks, I can do about half on my own. That's crazy. So after 2 years, I can do about half of the things my mentor is giving me on my own. But I'm now starting to get a little bit better at this stuff. I'm learning how to problem solve, and I'm looking at this big picture of IBM Z, and I'm starting to put all the pieces together. Um, I I know it's November, and I'm now 5 years and 2 months into my job, into my zSysProg job. I can do about 90% of the things that our team needs on my own. There's still that little 10% hanging out that I just can't quite get. And I go to the manuals, I go to Google, and I just can't quite figure it out. I still have to go and turn to one of these experienced legends that are part of our team, and they will say, "Hey, Chris, here's what you have to do to figure this out." And true story. Yesterday, I'm trying to build a ZOS, which I love, and I ran into a VTAM issue. And I don't like VTAM, and VTAM doesn't like me. And we wrestled all day. And I just haven't been able to figure it out. And I have to go work with my mentor and just work through it. That's just the way it is. So why would I take the time to go through a chart like this on a presentation? Because I want to just call to your attention, look at the timeline that it takes just to simply be competent, to be a valuable asset to your team. Look at how long it takes to come up to speed. Can you imagine if you went to a hiring manager and said to the hiring manager, yeah, I'll probably be competent in a year and a half. So you're going to pay me for a year and a half before I start to give value back to the team. I mean, that's kind of a dramatic statement, but the point of this slide is look at how long it takes, look at how complicated this job is. So if you're sitting there and you're struggling, you're 2 years into the job and you're just like, you know what, I can't figure this out. I had one of those days yesterday. I could not figure out that VTAM problem. Don't worry. It's complicated. It takes a long time. So at one of the presentations I was giving at a conference, a gentleman asked me in the presentation, "Hey, Chris, how much do you think you don't know?" And honestly, that's an outstanding question because I was giving this slide and I thought about his question. I'm like, wow, that actually is that's pretty cool. I wonder. And because I'm a total geek, what I did was I went back and I opened up Excel and I started putting down all the different disciplines and topics that I knew and things I heard about that I didn't know. And I came up with this algorithm. And the pie chart on the screen here, I think is pretty accurate. And I actually spent some time making that pie chart. That's not just a dramatic thing I threw on this chart. That pie chart is showing 1% of all that I think I need to learn to do this job. So there's good news and there's bad news. So the bad news is I'm going to be 500 years old before I master the job. But the good news is that there is always something to learn. There is never a dull moment. And that's just something that I love about this job. I just love that. So I'm very curious if you're sitting in the audience today and you have some serious experience with zSysProg, I'm just curious what your assessment of this would be. So if someone came up to you and asked you, hey, Mr. or Mrs. experienced zSysProg, how much do you think you don't know about the job? I'm just curious what your answer would be. So this is a true story. On day 3 of my job as a zSysProg, a peer from college was a tenant on the ZOS that I was administrating. This is on day 3. So he comes to me and he says, "Hey, Chris, I blew away my password. Can you reset it?" So here I am, peer from college. I want to show this guy that I'm competent. I want to prove that I know what I'm doing on ZOS. So I'm like, I got this. I'm going to rock this. So I set out to reset his password, and I'm like, how hard could it possibly be, right? So after like 20 minutes of floundering, I have Google open, I have the IBM manuals open, I'm trying stuff on the system. I just can't get it. I actually have to go ask my mentor. And I go to my mentor and I tell her what I'm trying to do. And she chuckles and she says, show me what you did. And she says, here is the trick. And she shows me what I was doing wrong and she shows me the trick. She shows me the trick. So after 30 minutes, I finally get this guy's password reset and off he goes. So now I know the trick. So guess what happens 4 days later? 4 days later, back he comes. So now my demeanor has changed a little bit. I'm now not so panicked about doing a password reset. And now I've got this. It takes me longer to log onto the system than it takes to reset his password. And now I'm going to be a little bit snarky and I set his password to forgetful and off he goes. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story is that in my experience as a zSysProg, there are just a bazillion little tricks that you learn along the way. And it's trying to keep track of those little tricks that is really going to be advantageous. So here's a question for you. I know that we're virtual and you're all on mute and you can't answer this, but just take a second. What's your number one obstacle from making you a successful zSysProg? What is the number one obstacle? I think if we were face to face right now, I'd be hearing, well, Chris, documentation lacking. Chris, we have a a dwindling staff resource, and there's a dwindling experience that we can tap into. So I think all of those are really good. My number one obstacle for making progress as a zSysProg is fear. Why would I say fear? Because I just don't have the skills, I don't have the experience, I don't have the confidence to get myself out of a pickle. So if I really clobber the system, my team is awesome, right? They don't care if I break something. Well, they care, but if I break something, they care more importantly that I fix it and that I learn from it and don't do it again. So our team fosters that learning experience, but I just don't have that. I don't have that confidence, and it takes a long time. I don't want to wreck a system. If you've ever built a ZOS, there is a lot of work that goes into building a ZOS. And once you get that ZOS up and humming, the last thing I want to do is come along and wreck it. So I don't want to make a goofball mistake just because I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have enough experience to know that if I make this rack F change, what's it going to do? I don't have that experience. I don't want to let my teammates down. They hired me to do the job. They hired me to be a valuable asset to the team. And I don't want to have to go to them and say, I just brought the ZOS down and I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. That's a real fear that I have. And I have that to this day. All of these things are real. I've had these on day one, and I have a little bit of these to this day. So fear is my number one obstacle. I'm actually going to come back to that in a couple of slides. So if we were face to face, this is the storytelling part of the presentation. And I think all of us, all zSys progs that I know, have these wild stories. So, all of these stories on the page are true. And unfortunately, I own the one on the left in the left bubble. And it's all of these stories that cause this fear that I have that's really holding me back and getting in the way of me making progress. But the stories, they're humorous in retrospect, usually, but we learn from them. Right. So my story, just very quickly, my story on the left is I was supporting a quasi-production system that's used for conferences and labs. One of the lab owners comes to me, says, "Hey, Chris, could you please make this RACF change?" And it was a really innocuous, minor data set class, easy peasy RACF change. So I'm like, okay, makes sense. Let me do my due diligence. And I researched what this change would do. And I didn't see any damaging effects. I saw no effects from this change. So I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm very comfortable in RACF. Sure. So I put in this change. And was everything fine? Absolutely. Everything was totally fine. Went home that day, came in the next morning. Was everything fine? Absolutely. Everything is beautiful. A week goes by. Everything is awesome. There's no issues at all, right? And I actually, be honest with you, I totally forgot about this change. About a month goes by. Someone comes to me and says, we need an IPL of this system. Could you please do that? Nothing would make me happier than IPLing a ZOS. So I set out to IPL. I IPL, system's coming up, TN3270 attempts to start, and it goes down in flames. So here I am, kind of a newbie, and now I can't get on the system. But I can see from the HMC that we have RACF issues. Now it dawns on me, oh my goodness, that tiny little RACF change I made 4 weeks ago is burning me right now. And now I can't get on the system into TSO to fix the RACF change. So Chris, you screwed up big time because number one, you don't have a backout plan. Number two, you don't have a back door and you have no way to get yourself out of this. So this is where those awesome experienced zSys progs come into play, right? My mentor, he let me sweat. Like I could literally, the hair on the back of my neck stood up with this issue. So you've probably had those types of experiences too. Mentor comes in, guides me along, and we fix it. We get out of it. And it ended up being he had an OSA ICC backdoor connection to the system. That's how we got on and fixed it. So bottom line, all of us, I think, have heard or experienced these stories which instill that fear in us, right? And that fear will bite us. So this is a presentation about secrets. So let's get on to them. Super secret number one. If you remember nothing from this presentation, please remember this, the positive attitude. This is so hard. And unfortunately, you seeing a slide from this goofball Chris about having a positive attitude is not going to make you have a positive attitude. That's something that's got to come from the heart. That's something that you really got to dig deep to find. But in my experience, a positive attitude has absolutely made the number one biggest difference in my zSysProg journey. How easy is it to have that negative attitude? Oh, the documentation stinks and I can't get this done because the doc is just not helping me. Or this is so complicated and it worked yesterday and it's not working today and there's nobody left here to do the job. And you know how it goes, right? We all hear that. Try not to fall into that negative attitude trap. I can guarantee that a positive attitude will help bring you a couple steps up in how you do your job. So along with your positive attitude comes expectations. So on the top left of the screen is that picture of the hikers. And hiking is a passion of mine. I love being outside. I love hiking. And when I came to this team, I'm very motivated, high work ethic. I really want to prove myself. And I I didn't really understand how to go from where I was to a successful zSysProg. So what happened was I ended up watching and observing, and my mentor at the time, he and still to this day, he just rocks the zSysProg role. He can talk to customers. He's very technical. He talks to managers. He knows it seems like he knows everything, and he's amazing. He helps me out of any pickle I get myself into. And when I started to see that, and I started to realize that, I was like, wow, that's what success looks like. That's who I want to be. That's how I want to behave as a zSysProg. But I didn't know how to get there. And my expectations were I'm a workhorse, right? I'm going to learn this stuff. I want to contribute to my team. I have the ambition, I have the work ethic, but I just couldn't get there. So my expectations were grossly out of tune with reality, grossly. And after 6 months, like on the right-hand side of the screen, after 6 months, that's one of my mentors, Judy, on the left, and my other mentor, Tom, on the right. That's what I was like. Literally, that's what I was like. So I had to be very careful because my high expectations and not meeting them was starting to impact my attitude. So the other thing with expectations, my mentor gave me an exercise early in my zSysProg journey. He told me to copy a file, and I kind of chuckled, and he kind of chuckled back to me, and I was under the impression, look, man, I came off of Windows or x86, where to copy a file it's 10 seconds. Control C, Control V. In Unix system services, it's an MV command, right? So he gave me this task to go copy a file, and after an hour, I had made no progress. So then, he basically says to me, because he knew I was getting frustrated, and this is where that negative attitude trap was starting to set in with me. He said, "Why don't you go to the whiteboard and whiteboard it out?" And that's an actual picture of that whiteboard from like 3-4 years ago. And that's the diagram that he and I drew on the whiteboard for copying a file. And what it's the reason that I'm bringing this up on this presentation today is because it helps to set my expectations, because I am so guilty of overestimating my time, because undoubtedly this slide will happen to you. We have to run a business. These types of questions are required to run our business, and you will get asked, how long is it going to take you to do this? And this is where that learning experience comes in to help answer questions like this. And I stink at it. I am really poor, but I'm trying to get better. So try to set your expectations accordingly. Super secret number 2, get out of your comfort zone. So Frank DiGilio, who was a distinguished engineer at IBM, he is a very, very smart man. very wise. He told me this very early on in my career because he observed me getting stuck. He saw me getting into this repetitive cycle where I was just chugging along. I'm finally to the point with my team that I can do something and I'm getting good at it. And I'm like, I don't want to leave this. I don't want to go back to that area I was in where I know nothing. I don't know anything what's going on. I'm going to get fired. I don't want to go back to that. I want to stay in this comfort zone. And he saw that. Frank saw that. And he told me, he said, you got to get out of your comfort zone. And I did not want to hear that. Let me tell you, I did not want to hear that. But he was right. And what it did was he opened my eyes and I realized, wow, he's right. You know that slide I showed you a little while earlier about fear? I realized that that was holding me back, right? So this is a true story. On our team, we have a very, very small team, and HSM broke, and we needed someone to fix it. And I did not volunteer to fix it because I don't know anything about it. See, I'm already making excuses. I didn't know anything about it, and I was terrified that if I start messing around with this and I can't figure it out, my team's going to think I'm a dope, right? And that fear was holding me back, and I was afraid of failure. But you have to overcome that. So how do you overcome that? With baby steps. So to get into this learning zone, to get past this fear, you have to take baby steps. And to me, whenever I have a daunting project that's rearing its ugly head, that first baby step is always the hardest. But as soon as I take that baby step, I start building that momentum, right? And I start getting some traction, and I just start plowing through it. I do what I do, right? And I would assume that you guys do the same thing. I really want to get to this growth zone. Part of the reason I'm here today. I love helping people. Right. I firmly believe we need to help each other. That's the only way we're going to survive as zSysProgs. We have to help each other. And I want to try to do that. And this is my goal. This is where I'm trying to get to today. So super secret number 2, get out of your comfort zone. So you just became a zSystems programmer. What are you going to do? How are you going to learn? How are you going to be valuable to your team? These are all questions that were going through my head when I first came to the team. I was convinced they were going to fire me because I knew nothing, right? And I went to one of my mentors and I asked my mentor, I said, what do I do? Like, how do I help these folks? And he gave me these 5 points. And I've been using these 5 points ever since. And I think they work for me. And I try to share this with other people. And I think it has worked for other people that have done this. He told me, Chris, first thing you do, identify some pain points. So I went to lunch with my team and I came back with like 47 pain points. So of all those pain points, I picked one. At the time, it was OmegaMon. So OmegaMon installation and configuration. Nobody on the team wanted to touch it. And this is no joke. At a team meeting, we're in a conference room. I literally I did this with my hand. I kind of stuck my hand up very sheepishly like that. I said, I'll take it. And they all chuckled. And I owned it. So I stuck my hand up. My manager said, "You own it. You better do it." I said, "Okay." So I got on a test system, and my next bullet here says master it. Did I master it? No way. So I installed it the first time. It took me like 2 weeks to get through it because I'm a rookie. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm working on it. So I get through it. Have I mastered it? No way. So what do? I uninstall it. I actually uninstalled the thing. It took me 2 weeks to get it installed. I uninstalled it. So now I install it again. Now I'm going to start taking some notes. So I started taking some rough notes because the official documentation just doesn't do it for me. I just have the hardest time reading theory and concepts and translating that into how to doc. So I like writing how to doc. So I started documenting it. I get it installed the second time. Have I mastered it? No way. And I actually did that cycle multiple times. So I got to a point of where I moved to that bullet that says document it. I got to a point of where my documentation has now matured enough where if I leave the team, somebody else could pick that documentation up and get OmegaMon installed. So that's the point that I want my documentation to be at. It's not professional. It's not great by any means, but it will help others get this job done. Then if OmegaMon, if our team has another OmegaMon installation that comes along, guess what? I'm probably not going to be doing it. It's going to be somebody else. But guess what? I'm going to be attached at the hip to that person and I'm going to help them through it. That's the teaching part. And then once I complete this cycle, I'm just going to pick another issue. And I'm going to keep doing that and keep doing that. And that's what I've been doing since day one. So number one, I would love to hear from you guys. If you guys have a different strategy that you're using to learn, like I'm all ears. I'm always open to learning a different way. And I know some people have said, well, Chris, don't you have a roadmap for your team of different technical topics to learn? And I'm like, no, we don't. It's just so broad that we don't have that. So if you have something that you would like to share with me, I'm all ears. Here is my strategy in action with two different examples. On the left-hand side of the screen is Dan Jast. He fresh out of college, zSysProg, total newbie. At the time, Zoe had just come out, and everyone on our team was pegged. Nobody had time to run and master Zoe. So Dan threw his hand up, owned it, and through a whole bunch of cycles, he installed Zoe, and he's now mastered it. He's now a subject matter expert in Zoe. But more than that, more than just learning Zoe, Dan has also picked up those skills of DFSMS, storage management, learning how ZOSMF works, learning how ParmLab and ProcLab works. Do you think that he knew all that stuff before he attempted to install Zoe? No way. But by taking that baby step, owning it, documenting it, and helping our team, he now knows all of that other stuff. So example number two, on the right-hand side of the screen, the far handsomer guy there, very similar story. Izoda had just come out, IBM ZOS Open Data Analytics, very similar story. Nobody else on the team could do it. That's where I cut my teeth as a zSysProg. And that's where I learned Unix. I had no clue what ZFS file systems were. Mounts, what's that? And I had to work through all that. And that's the foundation that I started with. So that is that strategy in practice. And again, I'm all ears. If anybody out there has suggestions about different ways to learn, all ears. Super secret number three, teamwork and networking. So about a year and a half ago, in early 2019, there's a new hire 1 week co-creation lab that is run at our site here in New York. And they needed an infrastructure to run that lab on. They needed a ZOS. They also needed the lab built, and they needed people to run the lab. So what happens is 30 new hires come into a conference room. They all sit down and they listen to a lecturer talk about a certain topic. When the lecturer is done, they get hands on the keyboard and they actually start working on a lab on a live system. So they needed a system. So these three folks, Dan Jast, Giovanna Hadley, and myself, we were tasked with putting together the system and running this co-creation lab. It's awesome. Like, it's so cool. So all three of us get together and we're all psycho about preparing and about testing, and that's what we did. We had this system built 6 months ahead of this event. So we had tested the system and tested the system and stress tested the system. And the Friday before the event, we tested that morning. And on Friday afternoon, we locked everything down. We made sure everything was golden for Monday morning. We all went home. Monday morning, we come in. Everything is all there, ready to go. 30 new hires come into the room. A VP is at the front of the room giving a lecture. The VP ends. All 30 people put hands on the keyboard. And it's just like something out of a movie. We see a hand go up on the left side of the room, and the person says, there's a problem on page 4 of the lab. this doesn't seem to be working. And almost, this is no joke, almost simultaneously on the other side of the room, similar thing. Hand goes up. Hey, there's something wrong with the lab. Page 4, something's not right. And it was like pandemonium ensued, and the wheels came off. So here we had tested and tested and tested. And now all of a sudden it is absolute pandemonium in this room. There's a VP in the back watching us. There's 30 people like just twiddling their thumbs. So what do? All zSysProgs have been here. What do? You hunker down, you problem solve, you pinpoint the root cause, and you find a solution. Well, guess what? After 30 minutes, we had no root cause. We had no solution. We were totally beside ourselves. We just could not figure this out. So what do? One of us knew a subject matter expert. His name is Torrin Riley. I think he was actually, changing outfits in a local phone booth or something into a superhero outfit. So we pulled him out of the cafeteria. He comes in, he sits down, and within a few minutes, he's like, I know what happened. And he helps us fix it. So we got it fixed. We got everything back up and going, and we went on with our business. So what's the point of this story? The point of the story is you have to build out your network structure. You have to learn who knows what, because we all have to work together. And that's to me, that's why we're here today. That's why I'm here today. We have to work together. So how do you do that? How do you build out your network? If you're new, get some mentors, get some coaches. And something that's not on this slide is peer mentoring. So I have several peer mentors, and you can call them mentors, you can call them coaches, but these are folks that influence you. So if I have a VTAM issue, which is true, I have a VTAM issue from yesterday, I may go to my technical mentor. And my technical mentor, if he doesn't know the answer, he may know somebody else that does. And that's the value of networking. If you're a 30-year veteran and you're kind of, chuckling about getting mentors because this goofball Chris told you to do that on a presentation, mentor other people like me. We need guidance, right? Like rookies like me, we need that experience and that guidance, and like, hey, why are you doing it this way, Chris? Don't you know there's a better way to do it? So that's something that manuals are not going to tell you. So the point, get some mentors. Speaking of mentors, this is Frank DiGilio. And everyone's watching the train crash. Nobody's listening to me right now, which is fine. But Frank is awesome, and he is a tenant on one of the ZOSs that I manage. And he comes to me one day when I was very, very early on, and he says, "Hey, Chris," he's like, "I don't have RACF special." He says, "Could you please do this RACF change for me?" No problem. Got it. Make the RACF change. Off he goes. Guess what? He comes back 5 minutes later. He's like, "Hey, Chris, I got another RACF change." Okay, no problem. I got you. Make the change. Off he goes. The third time he comes back, he changes his tune. Now he says, "Hey, Chris, so I don't bother you so much. Why don't you just give me RACF special? That way you can go do all those super important zSysProg things and I'll stay out of your hair." So I'm new. What do I know? I'm like, this guy, he's pretty awesome. Absolutely. So I gave him RACF special. And it's like 5 minutes later, there's new users on the system. There is smoke coming out of the Volsiers. I think the Keck is on fire. And it wasn't quite that bad, but you get the idea. So the point of the story, be careful what you wish for. If someone comes and asks you for RACF special, be careful of that one. And Frank is an awesome, awesome guy. And he is one that's given me a lot of wisdom that has gone into this presentation. Super secret number 4. ZOS and IBM Z are chock full of tools. And obviously this slide is a humorous slide, right? And the point of this slide is don't use tools the wrong way. Well, Chris, what do you mean? So perfect example, because I'm a goofball, I didn't know any better. When I first came to ZOS, I learned to copy files we're back to copying files, I know. I learned to copy files with ISPF 3.3. Okay, we've all used ISPF 3.3, and that's what I knew. So my mentor gave me a task, an educational task one day. He says, Chris, I need you to copy this file from point A to point B. Or actually, I think it was like I need you to copy this set of files from point A to point B. It was like 500 to 1,000 files, something like that. And I'm like, I kind of chuckled. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And then he kind of chuckled and he said, okay, good luck. So all I knew was ISPF 3.3. So here I am going through 500 files with ISPF 3.3. So my mentor leans over, he looks at my screen, he says, so what are you doing? Boss, I'm copying files. It's like, no, 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 no. He's like, do you know that there's a tool called ADRDSSU? He's like, you can do all 500 files in one fell swoop. So that's a silly story. It's a true story, but it's just an example of using tools the right way. ZOS has tons of tools, right? I'm not familiar with all of these, like Groovy and Aqua. I'm not familiar with those, but there's constantly new tools coming out. It's worth exploring. If you're new, you're fresh, you don't want to, on the bottom left, you see this green screen. I'm very comfortable with that. I can rock a green screen, but there are other people on our team that don't. So guess what? In the top right of this presentation slide, there's ZOSMF. If you can go use whatever tool you want and be accurate and be productive and get the job done, I don't care what tool you use. So just be aware that there are tons of tools out there. And don't poo-poo the ISPF text editor. I love the ISPF text editor. And I love Rex. Rex is super powerful. Don't poo-poo those tools, right? Those are really awesome tools. True story. On this screen, there are 3 different tools all doing the same thing. When I was first learning RACF, one of my mentors was absolutely adamant I had to use the ISPF command shell to do all RACF commands. Absolutely adamant. And after about an hour of banging my head on the wall, I was like, dude, I can't do this. Like, please, I need something else. And that's when I found the RACF panels on the bottom left of the screen. So RACF panels are drill down methodology. And that makes perfect sense. My brain processes drill down so much better than command line syntax. And I rock the RACF panels. So now when he comes to me and asks me to do a RACF thing, he's going to the ISPF command shell. I'm going to the RACF panels. And guess what? It doesn't matter. Both of us are getting the job done with equal efficiency, with equal accuracy. Now, to even make that even more cool, there's a product called zSecure. So one of the new folks on our team, Dan Jast, loves zSecure. That he is much more comfortable on zSecure than he is on the RACF panels or the ISPF command shell. And guess what? It doesn't matter. If he's able to get the job done productively and accurately, awesome. Super secret number 5, become an SME in a certain topic and keep moving on. And I also have Frank DiGilio's words of wisdom on the screen. Get out of your comfort zone, because what was happening was, excuse me, I was learning certain topics and I was really starting to get into it, like decollect administration. I love DASD, managing DASD. I love ZOS building. And I was getting stuck in those topics and I wasn't branching out. I wasn't learning other things. And that's where Frank DiGilio's wisdom comes in. Chris, you're spending too much time Rex coding. You got to go learn something else, like key rings and certificates. And it has to be relevant to your team's core mission. So what I'm trying to do, and what I would love to hear from some of you, is I have been trying to pick up a new topic and try to become a subject matter expert about one topic every year. So I've been here for 5 years, and this chart's a little outdated, but I'm trying to move on every single year to pick up a new topic. I'm just curious if there's someone that's been in this profession for 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, what your thoughts are on that. So with learning, another thing I love about Z Systems programming is that usually you can kind of guide what you work on. So our team is very small. We have a very small team, But even on our small team, we still have the freedom to kind of pick and choose the topics that interest us. So let's say there's a new project coming in, and it's going to require a lot of hardware and HCD stuff. Maybe that doesn't interest me. Maybe that interests somebody else. And we kind of have the opportunity and the freedom to say, you know what, I'm gonna skip this one, but I'm gonna pick up that next project that comes along with Zoe because I wanna learn more about Zoe and really become an expert on Zoe. So hopefully you are in a similar situation where you have somewhat freedom to pick and choose what you want. And you have to remember you got to balance the team's core deliverables, right? You can't just run off and do whatever you want because we still have a business to run. So that's what I love about being a zSysProg. And another thing that I would love to hear back from you folks on is I have been asked several times, hey Chris, could you come up with a roadmap of skills for a new person to learn? And I usually run screaming from that like my hair's on fire because in my experience there is no roadmap that can get you to a part. So if someone new comes into our team, it is based on what's going on our team at that moment in the next 6 months, in the next year. Like you have to learn the skills that are relevant. Like you can't go learn something that is going to be phased out soon. So hopefully you have that freedom, and that's what I love about ZOS. Number six, and hang in there with me, folks. We got about 12 minutes left. So super secret number six, you have to give back. This is awesome. So I love giving back. I love mentoring. I love teaching. It's like a passion of mine. And these five folks are the experienced legends. They are just amazing, right? They are the core of our team. It seems to me, they just know everything about everything with Z. And I just, it's amazing to watch them work. And what they're doing is they're teaching the goobers like me. So here, these experienced folks are teaching the new guys, right? And they're bringing the new guys up to speed. And what happens? These new guys are going out and learning things like Isota, Zoe, new tools, Aqua, whatever. And what's happening is, I know it sounds cliche, but really, we are truly expanding the total overall capability of the team. That is no lie. That is no lie. That's actually happening today. That's actually happening on our team. So you have to give back. And if you can, like if you're a veteran, if you can, try to pick up some mentees. I love working with those experienced veterans, man. You guys are awesome. Like you have so much wisdom. And it's just I learned so much from you guys, right? So there's mentoring here, and there's just the give back and helping your team to grow. And by the way, true story, Einstein's not part of our team. Yes, I was asked that at a conference. Okay. Super secret number 7. Chris, you have got to be kidding me. What a lame secret to end on. Are you kidding me? You're ending your presentation on something lame-o, like taking notes in a journal? Well, yes, I am, because I wish I had started my journal much earlier in my zSysProg journey. There are things that I've done in 5 years, one time. I've done a slip set. This is true. I've done a slip set one time in the past 5 years. So if you came to me today and you said, hey, Chris, can you please go do a slip set? I have no idea how to do it off the top of my head. I wouldn't even know where to begin. But I do know that I have notes on it. And the notes that are in my journal, it's a Microsoft Word document. So I have pictures, I have screenshots, I draw on my screenshots, I highlight things, I write things down in a way that I understand it. Because as well as the manuals are written, I just am not finding the how-to documentation that I need to go get a job done. So that's the value of a journal. And by the way, I have the worst memory of anyone on the planet. And typically it's in one ear and out the other. And with technical stuff that you just can't do that. So everything that I do goes into my journal. I update my journal every single day, every day. So I hope, like, if you're new to this stuff and you're watching this, I encourage you strongly to start your own journal. Just before we end here, I have an honorable mention. I have to mention this. This is meant to be a fun slide. Um, it's about performing root cause analysis. So on our team, my mentor has this hilarious thing that he says. And you ever have those days where you come in and it just seems like just the weirdest things are happening, right? I mean, just goofy things, coincidences, nothing is going right. I'm sorry, nobody would ever have a day like that. But in our shop, we do. So when we have those days, my mentor always jokingly says, "Oh, the gremlins are running around today," and it's funny. It brings levity to the situation, and it makes us chuckle. But I have to remember that when things happen, I have to take the time to do a proper root cause analysis. And wow, I just made some people mad by saying that. And because root cause analysis stinks and it's painful, but it helps. It helps. Whenever I do a full root cause analysis, either because someone's making me or I really just want to get to the heart of the problem, I always learn something because root cause analysis will force me to scientifically diagnose the issue. And I always learn something from that. So take the time to do root cause analysis. We have about 7 minutes left and we're on my last slide here. So on my last slide, I have an ask. So you just sat through 52 minutes of listening to this goofball Chris talk about ZOS systems programming. Now what? Well, number one, if you remember nothing from this presentation, I really hope that a positive attitude can help your life, help improve your professional career. I also want to just say, for the veterans that might be listening to this, remember what it's like to like me to have that extreme fear. So if you ask us to go do you ask a rookie like me to go do an IPL, and that IPL capsizes and TN 3270 is not coming up, there is a fear there that I have just because I don't have the experience that a 30-year veteran has. Remember what that's like? And for the newbies, like for the rookies out there like me, we have to do our due diligence. The veterans that we work with, hopefully that you work with, they're awesome. They seem to me like they always know the answer, and it's so easy to go to them for the answer, but we have to teach ourselves how to get those answers first. So we have to try to go through, Google, the manuals, any team local knowledge databases, our personal journal that you're now keeping because you watched this awesome presentation. So as rookies, we have to go through how to get those answers first before we tap on the veterans. And with that, Paul, I'm actually wrapping up my presentation now. And I just want to say thank you very, very much to everybody for listening to this. I most sincerely hope that it was helpful. And thank you very much for the time. And I'm open for any questions.
Fantastic, Chris. That was really interesting to listen to. And I can see from some of the comments coming through, it was much appreciated by the participants as well. We haven't got any questions.
No problem.
Pretty standard as we've been going through the session. I think that's probably just sort of reinforces how clear it was what you were actually covering. So
thank you, sir. Kim, I see your
request that anybody's got a question for Chris to reach out now, or if you think of something later or have any questions, then Chris's email address is actually in the session details. So no, that was fantastic, Chris. Thank you for taking the time to come and do this and risk going into the office to make sure your internet stayed up.
Yes, sir, Paul. Honestly, my privilege, and thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chris. So just finally to close, we can just remind you to, as participants, to complete the feedback form for Chris. That would be much appreciated. With that, just thanks again, Chris. I think that was fantastic. So a virtual round of applause.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much. Please, everyone, stay healthy.
Many thanks. Cheers. That's the end of this session. And that was 3AP, in case anybody wondered. Many thanks.
Thank you.